Hello and welcome to this Financial Social Work webinar on 8 steps for paying for college, how to navigate the minefield of student loans. This webinar was originally presented on August 14th, but due to some technical difficulties we encountered, Dr. Rubles and I are re-recording this so that everyone has a great recording to learn from. My name is Rita Wolfson. I am the founder of Financial Social Work and the Center for Financial Social Work. And today we are so happy to have Dr. Paul Rubles, who is recognized nationally as a preeminent authority on college funding matters and has been quoted in print and broadcast media numerous times. For today's agenda, we will be doing a welcome. That's what I'm doing with you all now, and talking about financial social work. Then Dr. Rubles will do his 8 steps for paying for college. I will talk for one slide then about financial social work, and ordinarily we would do a Q&A, and we did have a great Q&A last week when we did this webinar, but since it's just Paul and myself, we'll be skipping that part today. So for those of you who are new to financial social work, I'd just like to briefly share that our mission is to help men and women begin the journey to sustainable, long-term financial behavioral change. And our goal is to make a contribution to personal, professional, and financial change. So what makes financial social work special? We very much believe it's because it is a behavioral model, which is introspective, strength-based, experiential, heavily psychosocial, multidisciplinary, and interactive. And this is what it looks like. It's an ongoing process of engagement, education, motivation, validation, and support. And it looks something like this. It's your relationship with your money that drives your financial behavior, and it's a person's financial behavior that determines his or her financial circumstances. And that little twisting arrow shows you that that's where the magic happens. That's where financial behavioral change happens. And this is just a smattering of our many agencies who have brought staff in as students and who have become graduates. So at this point, I am going to put up Dr. Rubles' slides and just mention that he is a Stanford PhD and has numerous other degrees. He presents at hundreds of workshops at schools, service clubs, and across the nation at various other companies and organizations. And Paul is the architect of a new paradigm for financial aid, which, among other things, eliminates the scourge of student loans as a form of aid. But until the time that that is more broadly accepted, that new paradigm, which sounds great to me, Dr. Rubles is going to tell you, all of our listeners, how to navigate financial aid forms and important information. So Paul, it's all yours now.
Thanks, Rita. I'm talking to you from the somewhat foggy, small California town of Half Moon Bay, where my office is and where I live. You know, when you go to a financial aid night at a high school, one of the things you're going to hear somebody say at some point, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, parents, paying for your child's college education is an investment. Well, I don't know about you, but where I come from, an investment means you have a chance of getting your money back. It's really a bill, and what I want to do in this session today is to teach you some ways to navigate that bill so it has as little impact as possible on your financial security. You know, all the financial aid forms have indicate that it should be a student filling them out. My advice to you is that students don't pay for college, parents pay for college. So when it comes time to complete the forms, you shouldn't let your student within 100 yards of that form. This is an adult activity, and I'm speaking to adults now, and I'm going to try to help you begin to get a sense of what the system is like so that you can emerge from it financially whole. Everybody in this audience should at some point fill out a financial aid form. You do so to determine three things. One, by filling out the financial aid form, it's sent into a processing center, which takes a look at the data that you provide, and will determine one thing and one thing only based upon what's on that form. It will determine how much money your family is expected to be able to pay for 1 year of college. That number is called the expected family contribution of the EFC. So it's important to understand the form itself. So you have to tell the truth on the form, but it's a good idea to know the factors that determine this EFC so you can cope with them one at a time. The second reason you're going to fill this out is just because some fancy federal formula says you can afford X number of dollars may not make it so. Maybe you can't afford that. Or maybe you don't want to afford that because in order to afford that, you have to invade a long-term financial investment, which might include capital gains taxes or tax losses of some kind, a penalty of some kind. So if you don't want to use that and you'd rather preserve it, one of the automatic byproducts of everyone just filling out the financial aid form is that it's going to open up a line of credit with the federal government that will allow you to borrow as much money as you need. It's unsecured money anytime you want it in order to help you navigate the financial issues associated with college without putting yourself at financial risk in the long run. It's the only banker ever who almost always says yes. So it's a good idea to open up that line of credit just in case the unforeseen happens. Speaking of which, the third reason why we're going to fill this thing out is, okay, you may be fine now and you may have this college funding under control. But what happens if you get fired, or what happens if there's a sickness, or what happens if there's an earthquake and your income goes from X to 1/4 X? What are you going to do then? Well, what you would do then if you have a financial aid form on file at a college, you pick up the phone, you call the financial aid office, and you say, I want to report a special circumstance, loss of income. And what colleges are very good about doing is to ask you, okay, how is your income going to change? And they are empowered by the government to recalculate your expected family contribution, not on your past income when you were financially healthy, but on your projected income under these new circumstances. So always, always, always make sure that while your kids are in college, you have a viable financial aid form on file in the financial aid office. Next slide, please. There are two kinds of financial aid. If you look at the pie chart, there's a little sliver that's called merit-based aid. That's aid that's given out because of various attributes. A student may be a good athlete or something like that, or may have a particular ethnicity. They're typically, first of all, it's a very small slice of the pie, and typically they're one-time only scholarships, and typically also they're rather small, $500,000 or $2,000. When you're dealing with a financial burden of $40,000, that's really not a particularly great way to plan to pay for college. The other issue is that most merit-based scholarships are one-time affairs. Once you get it 1 year, you're not eligible for the next year. That's particularly true of local merit-based scholarships from Rotary Club and other places like that. The big chunk of that pie is about $140 billion. And the nice thing about it is that if you qualify for aid using that part of the pie the first year, if your income and assets don't change very much over the course of 4 years, you're likely to receive similar amounts of aid year 2, 3, 4, and 5 because it's based on your financial condition, not any particular qualities on the part of the student. Next slide, please. The two forms you need to know are the FAFSA form. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's typically done online, but this is just a picture of the snail mail version of it. There are lots of services that are online. remember the first F in FAFSA stands for free. There's a website online called FAFSA.com, which it's a very good site, but when you get all done, they'll want a credit card number or something like that, and they'll charge you for it, and a lot of people actually use that. It's a good site, but truth be told, you shouldn't have to pay for filing a FAFSA. Next, please. Second form that some of you are going to have to cope with is called the CSS Profile. It's brought to you by our friends from the College Board, who make a lot of money. Those of you who are in the pre-college mode, it's pretty easy to spend anywhere from $600 to $800 just with the College Board and SAT scores, advanced placement stuff, and all that business. Some colleges, particularly very expensive colleges, want to know more about you than is afforded on the FAFSA, particularly when there's issues like divorce and separation, that kind of stuff. So they ask the colleges ask them to include the CSS Profile as one of their requirements for financial aid. It's very similar to the FAFSA, but it's like FAFSA heavy. There's a lot more in-depth stuff, and there's more of a vertical view of you over a number of years. The FAFSA just asks about 1 year. The Profile asks about 3 years. So it's kind of a thorny hurdle that is required by about roughly 10% of all the colleges out there. Next slide, please. This is how the formula works. Across the top of the slide, you'll see 3 numbers. The cost of attendance. The cost of attendance, you know, if you went to Stanford and you said, okay, what's the tuition there? Stanford would say it's about $39,000. You say, wow, I thought it was more than that. So you get excited and you apply and you get admitted. You get your first bill and you multiply by 2 and it comes out $65,000. You said, what's going on there? Is this bait and switch? No, you didn't ask the right question. The right question is, when you go to a college, you ask, what is the cost of attendance? The cost of attendance includes room and board, tuition, fees, books, sometimes travel. So just to illustrate the process, I have sort of 3 generic costs of attendance. $16,000 at a public college, but you know, truth be told, across the nation, it goes anywhere from about $6,000 a year to as much as $35,000 a year at UC Berkeley. Private colleges, a pretty good means amount is $45,000, and for elite colleges, $65,000 and going up every year. And you know, I put elite, I put that in just to suggest it's expensive. Just because the college is expensive, it doesn't mean it's the best college for your kid. You should remember that. So let's suppose we have a family making about $65,000. They've applied to a public college. They've been accepted. The admissions office of the public college contacts the financial aid office and says, this kid applied for financial aid? And they find out, yes, they have. Next click. It turns out this family has a calculated family contribution of about $10,000, but this place costs $16,000. So when you click it again, you'll see that the demonstrated need is $6,000. So that means that this family would be eligible for about $6,000 in need-based financial aid. They'd be expected to pay $10,000, and together the family contribution, the demonstrated need, equals the cost of the college. But here's what most people don't understand, and it's really important that you do. That once the family contribution is calculated for any given year, it remains the same regardless of the cost of college. So if this same family had applied to a private college of $45,000, the click would say their family contribution is $10,000. It's the same as it would be for a public college. The difference would be, however, if you click it once more, that they have a demonstrated need of $35,000. And so on. If you see the next 2 clicks, you'll see that the family contribution stays the same, but that the demonstrated need increases with the cost of college. Now think about this for a second. If your kids were, say, freshmen in high school, and you knew the freshman year in high school that your family contribution was likely to be about $10,000, which is less than almost any college in the country, it would seem to me that you could then turn to your student and say, you know what, there's 2,400 colleges in this country. you should pick some that really work best for you, because I know I'm going to pay about $10,000, whether it costs $65,000 or $16,000. So in this case, it's not just what you know, it's when you know it that's really important. So there are many calculators out there for those of you who have younger children, and it might be a good idea to find out what awaits you at the time when you have to apply for financial aid. And you can fill out a free application and put your student's PIN number and yours, and you can do it for nothing. Next slide, please. It's important that you get a kind of an idea of the where this money comes from. How is the EFC calculated? There's a lot of factors, but the four major ones are these. The parents' adjusted gross income, that's the bottom line of the front page of your 1040 before you get clever. It goes anywhere from nothing if you have very low income, all the way up to 25% if you're supporting a six-figure income. And in between there's various gradations. So say at 80,000 it might be 14%, at 90,000 it might be around 20, 21%, and so on. So you can get kind of an idea of what it looks like. Then takes a look at the parent assets that have been reported on the FAFSA, and after all of the allowances and stuff, you can pretty well judge that they'll want about 5.6% of whatever that number is. So if you have report $100,000 in assets, you can pretty well guess it's going to raise the family contribution by roughly $5,600. Then takes a look at student's income. The formula, the student can earn about $6,130 every year without any penalty at all. But once a student's income exceeds that threshold, the formula is going to want 50 cents of every dollar over that number. So if you have a student who reports an income of $10,000 on the financial aid form, you can pretty well predict it's going to raise the family contribution by roughly $2,000. Then takes a look at dependent students' assets, and the formula, those assets that are reported, you don't have to report very many of them. Up to 25% of the assets if you're using a profile form. With the FAFSA, it's 20% of the student's assets. So that will affect the EFC. Next slide, please. Where does this stuff come from? It's important that you have some sense of where this money that financial aid offices around the country have to come up with. Where does it come from? By far, the biggest reservoir for that aid comes from federal Title IV money. As I said earlier, there's about $140 billion in that pocket. So if I'm a financial aid officer and I have a needy student, I'm going to tap that pocket first, simply because it's not our college's money, it's federal money. The states have all kinds of programs. There are some that are very generous, like here in California. If you qualify for state aid at UC, you're guaranteed to get about $12,000 or $13,000 a year in aid from the state. Other states are not as generous. Some states are not generous at all. Then there's campus-based pocket, and that varies with the college itself. If you really need money, it's not the world's worst idea to look at the college's financials and see how much money the college has, because typically wealthy colleges are more responsive to the needs of low-income and middle-income people than low-wealth colleges. Next slide, please. There you go. There are three forms of aid, and let's go through each of them so you understand what they are. The first form are called loans. It's called self-help aid, and the reason it's aid is it's subsidized. That is, if you get a student loan, it means that since it's part of financial aid, the interest will not accrue while the student's in college, and up to a small period beyond that. If they go to graduate school, they'll continue to not be due and payable. And they're subsidized by the government, which means that the interest will not accrue, and it's not going to compound while the student's still in college. And some people say, is all the money going to be loans? No. If you look at the chart, the first column indicates the maximum loans for each year. First year, $3,500, and sophomore year, $45, junior, senior, $55 each year. You take a fifth or sixth year, you can get another $5,500 each year. Those are self-help subsidized loans. In addition to that, the student's also eligible for another $2,000 each year. But these are not subsidized loans. They become due and payable while the student's still in college. So you need to be able to recognize what's a subsidized loan and what's an unsubsidized loan. When you get financial aid award, they'll usually tell you which is which. Then there's a Perkins loan for pretty low-income students that's issued through the college. It's government subsidized. You can get up to $4,000 to $5,000 a year. It's only 5%. It's only a 5% loan. It's a very good loan. So if you get it, if you had to choose between a direct loan or a Perkins loan, I take the Perkins loan because it has a lower interest rate. Then there's something called a PLUS loan. PLUS stands for P-L-U-S. It stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Student. It is not, I want to repeat, it is not financial aid. It is not need-based aid. I say it again, it is not need-based aid, and I'll show you why that's important in a minute. Next slide, please. The interest rates in the coming year are these. For all undergraduate direct loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, it's 4.66%. Last year it was 3.4% for subsidized loans. It's going up again. For graduate and subsidized and unsubsidized student loans, for those who have graduate students, 6.21%. And for those plus loans, it's 7.21%. The higher rate, but they can still be useful. I'll show you why later on. So those are the interest rates for 214, 215, and are likely to increase going up as long as we continue this insanity of putting our young people in debt. Next slide, please. There's something called the 150% rule. Up to this year, you could only get subsidized loans for 5 years if you're in a four-year undergraduate program. But because it's taking longer to graduate, they instituted a 150% rule, which essentially says you're eligible for federal aid not for just 4 years, not just for 5 years, but for up to 6 years, which is 150% of the normal time it takes to get a 4-year degree. So you just got federal aid for an additional year under the 150% rule. Next slide, please. Another form of aid, which I kind of like actually, is called work study. It's also self-help aid. The student gets a job around campus. Typically have flexible hours. The student can actually choose the kind of job they want. A lot of students just want to get it over with, so they get a job, serving breakfast and then they're done for the day. Other students, if they're a pre-med student and they get work study, it's not the world's worst idea to get a job in the chem lab or the biology lab because you can learn something while you're there. And if your student, parents, if your student doesn't, gets work study and you're getting financial aid, and the student doesn't really care where he or she works, I have a suggestion. Have a student work in the financial aid office. That will put the fox in the hen house, and you have a really good kid. The chances are very good that you'll get preferred financial aid awards for all 4 years. The other thing about work study, remember that slide that says what affects the EFC, and one of them was student income? Any money you get from work study doesn't count as ordinary income. So it would be foolish if it did, because if your student had to add to, let's say, $6,000 worth of regular income, another $3,000 for financial aid, it doesn't make sense for financial aid to reduce eligibility for aid. So any aid earned through work study doesn't count. Next slide, please. Third form of aid is good stuff. It's grants and scholarships. It's free money. You don't have to pay it back. And the best one for low-income families is the Pell Grant. It's a very active program. It's pretty easy to get. Colleges are very happy to distribute it. There's a whole bunch of other federal programs as well. For most of you who are middle-income people, you'll dutifully fill out the FAFSA. You'll get the report back to the FAFSA. And in the first sentence, it'll say, if the numbers you have given us are correct, you are not eligible for a federal Pell Grant. And when most people say, oh my God, I'm not going to get into aid. No, it just means your income is above the threshold for Pell Grant awards, and it's a good thing it is. You're just not going to get that. So continue reading on, continue being in the system. States, grants and scholarships, they vary by the state. So it wouldn't be the world's worst idea to check what the college support programs are in your state. They really vary a lot. And campus-based are many and varied, and I already commented about the kind of colleges that give out the most money. Next slide, please. Okay, this is really important. A lot of people from one state want to go to a publicly supported university or college in another state. First thing you need to know is it's going to cost you more than in-state people in that state. You're going to pay out-of-state fees, which are significantly higher. In the state of California, in-state tuition and fees are about $33,000. Out-of-state is about $50,000, so it's a big difference. And then if you qualify for aid, you're going to be in the back of the financial aid line. Why? Because that state's university is supported by the taxpayers of that state, and they get priority in everything, including lower fees, including financial aid. You're going to be in the back of the line, and people in the back of the line typically get very inferior financial aid packages that include lots of loans and lots of parent loans, and not a lot of self-help aid in the form of work study and the free money. Next. It's important that you choose a college that fits a student's needs. A lot of people have this knee-jerk response, well, I'll send my kid to community college, I'll spend a couple of years there, and go on to a four-year college. It sounds like it's a good deal, but statistics might suggest otherwise. Lots of kids go to community college, and they transfer, and suddenly they say, wait a minute, you don't have the right prerequisites for that major. It's going to take you more time. In fact, in the state of California, of the students who go to community college with the intent of transferring to a four-year college, the statistics suggest that only about a quarter of them ever do, and the typical time it takes them to complete a degree is 3 to 4 more years. So there's not a whole lot of upside to that. And don't forget the 75% who wanted to go to a four-year college, who for whatever reason dropped out of the system altogether. And sometimes people, will pick a low-cost four-year college. Well, that may or may not be a good deal. Let's go to the next slide. Always check the time it takes to get a degree. If you're getting an undergraduate degree, a BA or a BS degree, it should take 4 years. It shouldn't take 5. It shouldn't take 6. It shouldn't take 7. Because there are all kinds of added costs to year 5 of a 4-year plan. Let's go to the next slide, please. Well, what is the cost of year 5? Well, you got to pay for college again. Whatever your EFC is, you got to do that again. You'll have another round of student loans for sure. And then there's one thing nobody thinks about. It's called opportunity costs. If you weren't languishing in year 5 to get a 4-year degree, you would be out there possibly making a living as a college graduate, making between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. But you can't do that yet because you're not a college graduate yet. So the idea that, you hear the expression time is money, when it comes to higher education, it definitely is money. So try to do your research to get in and out of whatever program you're in 4 years. If your college that you're applying to has a bad record, I would steer clear of that college with a lot of determination. Find someplace to do it in 4 years. Next slide, please. So here's a case study. The cost of my college is $50,000. It turns out the parents who want to come to my college, they can afford $10,000. Subtract $10,000 from $50,000, they have a need of $40,000, like in that earlier example I gave you. Next slide, please. So here's what happened. They got a financial aid award. There's a review. The cost of the college is $50,000. They needed $40,000. And this is what it might look like. You'll be offered a subsidized direct loan. Remember, subsidized, the government pays the interest while the student's in college. That's not due and payable until after they get out of college. And put in parentheses following each amount the pocket where that it came from, so you get used to where the sources are for this stuff. So the student got $3,500 in direct loan from the federal pocket. Federal work study, $2,000. It's typically from the federal pocket. The campuses have been throwing in some of their own money. to dramatically increase the supply of very cheap labor on campus is not a bad idea. So I happen to like federal work study. Pell Grant A in the state of California, this is the maximum you get for a private college in the state of California. Your state has different numbers than this one, but I just wanted to illustrate this. The Alumni Scholarship of 14551 from our campus-based funds. And JP Aardvark Scholarship of 10,241 also from our campus-based funds. Total award, $40,000. Great award. It takes care of the needs. It's a nice distribution between good stuff and loans. It looks pretty good. Does it always happen? It almost never happens, and this is why. Next slide, please. Case study, it works perfectly, as I just suggested. Let's go to the next, right on the next slide. Change the slide, please. And this is what typically happens. The need of this family is $40,000. So you get an award that's just like the other award, except the Aardvark Scholarship is missing. So the college says, here's your total award. The parent looks at it and says, wow, almost $30,000. In the back of their mind, they multiply by 4 and say, if our financials stay about the same, we're going to get over $100,000 in really good aid to this college. And so you go out and you party, except for one teeny-weeny little detail. Next slide, please. You have an unmet need of $10,241. Last time I checked, if you multiply that by 4, that's $40,000. Last time I checked it, that's not chopped liver, that's real money. So when you see a gap, you want to call the financial aid officer and say, we have a gap of $10,241. How can we work together to fill that gap? Most parents don't even know the gap exists. But I'm telling you, when you understand how the financial aid system, you've been gapped here. So you want to make contact with the college in a respectful way and negotiate with them. I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is called masquerading. This is a tougher one for people to understand. Same situation as before, except in the place of the Aardvark Scholarship, they have something called a plus loan. Remember that? Parent loan for undergraduate student? The college will simply tack it on there, and they'll say, the total award is $40,000, and the college will say, there's no unmet need there. We took care of your need, except for this. Next click, please. The college will say, you don't have any more need. In fact, you do. You've been gapped. $10,241. Why? Because a plus loan is not or never was intended to be need-based aid. The plus loan was put in place to help parents pay their calculated family contribution. But now colleges are masquerading it as need-based aid, and I will tell you that 99% of every American out there will happily accept it and party. You shouldn't. So recognize it for what it is. You've been gapped by $10,241. Next slide, please. So when you evaluate an award, there's two critical dimensions. Quantitative, does it fill your need? And you know how to do that. And qualitative, is there a balance between self-help aid and free or gift money? Next slide, please. So when you evaluate an award, these are the required elements. You need to know the cost of attendance. What does the place cost? You need to know your BFC. How much will you be expected to pay? Then you want to get the total amount of need-based aid that you've been given and see if it equals your need. And you also want to take a look at it and see what kind of balance there is between self-help aid and free money. Typically, as a rule of thumb, the less money you need in financial aid, the more self-help aid and the less free money will be associated with the award. If you have a lot of need, then you'll get a bigger percentage of that need will be taken care of with free money. If any of these data points are missing, just pick up the phone and call the financial aid office of the college to ask them to supply the missing data. Next slide, please. This is cropping up, and I'm going to tell you about it because I don't have an answer for you actually. The EFC, when the original law was produced, meant the expected family contribution. It was a dollar amount. So if you had an EFC of $21,043, it would say 21043 would be your EFC. Now they refer to that number as an index of eligibility, but nobody knows what that means. So if it's not a dollar amount, what is it? And there's not a person on the planet who actually knows what it is. So how can you determine if it's not a real number, whether you've been gapped or not? The colleges just say, well, it doesn't mean anything, it's just an index of eligibility. And because of that, it throws the whole process open to guesswork and often deception. So it's not all colleges practice that kind of, what I think is deception. But it's out there, and because it makes it much more difficult to negotiate, I like to indicate that is something that I think is pretty sinister. Next slide, please. Okay, let's start getting some money-saving tips. How are you going to save some dough here? Suppose you had to pay $12,000 for your EFC. It's much easier to pay $1,000 a month over 12 months than it is to write a check for $12,000 or 2 checks for $6,000. So if you have a budget, you want to try to pay for college out of your normal income stream if you possibly can. So you want to ask the college, do they have access or do they offer a monthly payment plan? Because if they do, it's a pretty good idea for you to keep the money in your pocket rather than to send them advance payment for their pockets. This is very interesting. Consider having more than one student attend college at a time. Let's suppose you have a family contribution of $40,000, so you're making some pretty good dough. And you have a kid in college. So let's suppose you have 2 kids, and they're 3 years apart. You're going to be paying $40,000 a year for 7 years. What would happen if you had 2 of those kids in college at the same time? In fact, in the situation I just gave you, you're going to have an overlap 1 year where you're going to have 2 kids in college. So that year, you're going to fill out 2 financial aid forms, 1 for each kid. And on the line where it says how many students do you have in college, you're going to put 2 on each one of the forms. That doesn't mean you're going to have to pay $80,000 a year. Quite the contrary. It means that the family contribution, when it's calculated on each of these forms, it's not going to be $40,000 because you have 2 in college. It's going to be $20,000 for each kid. So you'll still be spending $40,000 a year, but in this case, you'll be spending $40,000 for 2 kids or $20,000 per kid. So if that family came and was sitting in front of me in the office and said, Paul, how do I save some money? I can't do this for 7 years. I would suggest something like this. Have your oldest student take a gap year, take a year off, and maybe get an internship in a career that he or she might be interested in, so that you just shorten the tail on the college kite by a whole year. Well, in this instance, you just saved $40,000. Now, I know that doesn't play very well at cocktail parties. When people say, where's your kid? You say he's taking a year off, they're going to snicker and say you can get into college. It doesn't matter what they think. It matters what you think. So you may want to explore something like that. When I was a principal of Gunn High School in Palo Alto, we had a set of triplets. The guy thought he had died going to heaven. He sent all 3 kids to Ivy League schools for the price of 1. So it's not a bad idea to consider having students, spacing students close together. Those of you who, when people make fun of you because you had your kids too close together, it wasn't like Dr. Spock who said every 4 years, you did it once a year for 3 years. You're going to have the last laugh because you're going to spend a lot less on college. You're going to have a group rate when your kids get ready for college. It's a good idea to keep student income and assets low. You know the formula already. It goes after student income pretty aggressively, and assets. Actually, if the student's a dependent student, the only asset you'd have to actually report as a student asset would be if the student has an UGMA or an UTMA. If you don't know what those are, that means you don't have them. But if you do know what they are, you have to report those as student assets. There's no way to get out. Well, there's a way to get out of it, but it's more expensive. So pretty much you can report any student assets as long as they're dependents as a parent asset. So you remove it from a 20% column in terms of the EFC and put it in a 5.6% column in the EFC. In separated families, this stuff is really tricky. In separated families, if possible, have the less affluent parent claim the student during the college years because it will be that parent whose income and assets will determine the EFC and not the other parent. On the FAFSA In a separated or divorce situation, the only parent's information on the FAFSA is the parent who's the custodial parent. And the litmus test would be which parent claims a student as an exemption on the 1040. The other parent disappears. The same is not true on the profile, and that's you really should get some advice on the profile as to how to represent yourself in a divorced or a separated situation. It's a little tricky, but it certainly can be navigated. Next slide, please. Just as an aside, the FAFSA wants parents to be dealt with in this way. Any two adults living together in your home that provide support for the student, and they don't have to be married. My advice is one of those two people should, whoever files the FAFSA, should claim the student as a dependent and leave it at that. And how do you prove that this other person is contributing in any way? So you can deal with that any way you want. Next slide, please. It's a good idea. The FAFSA can be completed on January 1st. And you say, well, Paul, my taxes aren't done. How am I going to do that? I fill it out as soon as you can after the beginning of the new year. And the reason for that is even if your taxes aren't done, they'll ask you on the form, are your taxes done? You'll say no. They'll know this is an estimate, and when the time comes, they'll want to copy the taxes when they're ready. But what this allows you to do every year by filing early in the game is it gets you in the front of the financial aid line at a college. And people in the front of the line typically get free money first. People in the back of the line gets what's left, which is usually loans. So it just is a matter of protocol. It's a good idea to line up early. Don't wait till everything's done. If you have any, if you're filling out the profile, they're going to want to know the value of your house. If you're filling out the FAFSA, if you have any rental property or any other property, they'll want to know the value of that property. They'll treat the equity in it as an asset. So in order to do that, before you send it in, you might want to go on to www.mineaid.org. There's a calculator on there that will evaluate your property on a national average. And for people in fairly affluent areas, it's a way to reduce the perceived equity in your house. And everybody should do it. If the estimator comes out with a higher value than you think your house is worth, use the lower of the two values always. Next slide, please. Go back one slide, please. Don't brag on the form. Remember what you're doing. You know, most of us, when you get a financial form, we start to giggle really quite a bit because we want to get a lower interest rate, we want to get a better mortgage, we want to get a cheaper car. This is very different. This is one of those few times where you don't want to look very successful. You have to tell the truth, but don't embellish the truth to make you look more successful than you really are, because it could cost you a lot of money. So be very, very careful in how you fill out the financial aid forms, and do it the first time around, because if you overvalue something and then you change your mind because you think it's overvalued, it's like a question in an open court. If they ask you a question and it's a bad question, the judge says disregard the answer to that question. It's really hard for the jury to disregard something you already know. Be prepared to negotiate with your financial aid administrator. I need to tell you, financial aid administrators across the board are genuine heroes. It's the toughest job on the planet. They're asked to make good stuff with a bad system. The financial aid system at every level is underfunded. The costs are going up. It's not the financial aid administrator's fault. But they're expected to make sense out of it and to help students at the same time serve their colleges. It is a tough, thoughtless kind of job. It's really hard to do. So whatever you do, whenever you talk to a financial aid administrator, I want you to treat those people with the respect they mightily deserve. I wouldn't wish that job on anybody. Next slide, please. Never, ever, ever pick a fight with a financial aid officer. You're going to lose. It's like a shootout at the OK Corral, and you're standing there at one end of the corral, naked as the day you were born, and across the other end of the corral comes your opponent, draped with ammunition, bristling with guns. If you're so stupid under those conditions to say draw, you deserve to die. Your job is to work with that person, work with the financial aid officer in every possible way, be as good a human being as you can be, and to the point where your opponent's going to drop their guns and use their arms to embrace you. It takes lots of social skills. There'll be lots of reasons why you want to get mad. Don't ever lose your temper with a financial aid administrator. So that's good advice. You should pass that on to your student as well, because the student's going to be a representative of your family. Before you accept an outside scholarship, and many of you will, ask the financial aid officer at the college what they plan to do with it. Next slide, please. This is what happens to typical outside scholarships. If an outside scholarship is won, it's typically reported to the college. So here's a student, they're getting $25,000 from the college in a financial aid award. The college then is informed that the student has a $5,000 Rotary scholarship. Well, that's $5,000 the student no longer needs. So the college will likely reduce its award by the amount of that scholarship. So the college aid drops to $20,000 and it's replaced by Rotary aid. As a practical matter, the student's financial or the parent's financial situation is unchanged by this additional scholarship. So it's a good idea to know what some of your options are and how you can work with the college to make a financial award like a scholarship work. And it's also, for those of you who actually belong to organizations that give out scholarships, it wouldn't be the worst idea to know some options that would help you get a greater bang for the buck out of your scholarship. Next slide, please. There are a lot of tax credits and a lot of tax benefits to going to college. The biggest one is the American Opportunity Tax Credit. There's others, but make sure you're aware, make sure your CPA is aware of tax benefits of college. There's a lot of them, so make sure everybody's aware of it. You should have, if you don't know how to do it yourself, you should use some of the more reliable tax preparation software, or if you have a CPA, use that person, because the tax system we have is ridiculous and it's hard to navigate. There are certain advantages that can be made by repositioning assets. I tend not to recommend them. For instance, if you have $10,000 in the bank, it's going to raise the family contribution by a couple of thousand or $1,000, let's say. You could avoid that by transferring that money into a retirement asset, which is not taxed by the system at all, and increase your eligibility for financial aid. That assumes the financial aid system is 100% reliable. It's not, and there's certain downsides to having assets that you can't get to because they're retirement assets. So my feeling is be careful about repositioning assets and juggling around to qualify for more financial aid. The cure in that case could be worse than disease. It's like a tail wagging a dog. I mean, if you're asking me Paul, in one sentence, what's the best advice you could give me to get ready for college? I would tell you in a heartbeat, get as rich as you can as fast as you can, and then we'll just deal with the impact of that. There's no downside to that. We just have more things to work with. Keep all your financial aid papers in a known secure place or in a file that you get to online. And it's always a good idea to have your financial records in pretty good shape. Next slide, please. So here's how we pay for college. These are kind of general protocols how to do it. First of all, calculate the cost of attendance. You know how to do that already. Subtract financial aid, if any. So now that defines how high the mountain is going to be. Then 3, spread the remaining balance over 10 or 12 monthly payments and see if you can afford that. If you can, you're home free. Just do it. If it's not affordable, then apply. If you have any more student loan eligibility available, use the maximum student loans because it's the cheapest money you can use, and there's certain tax advantages for the student. If it's still not affordable, what I would suggest is borrow some plus loan money to make the payments affordable rather than to fritter away your long-term financial security just to avoid taking out some short-term debt. And then enroll in a monthly payment plan to pay the rest of it through the college, and just repeat that until graduation. And then when your student graduates, just pretend for as long as it takes that the student's still in college, and see how much you can afford to pay for college that year. You don't have a kid in college, but you have some little college debt, and just keep paying it until you get paid off. With one of my daughters, we had a shortfall every year of about $8,000. So I took out a plus loan. She graduated in the spring of 2000, and we just pretended she was in college until 2 years and 6 months later, when we paid off all the borrowing for college, and we sent her to private college. We never once took a nickel out of savings. That's the way to do it. Nobody likes to borrow, but when you borrow to preserve your financial security, that's a good idea. Under no conditions should anybody, any parent, ever sacrifice their long-term financial security just because they want to be a good parent. You are not doing you or your kids a favor by being so generous to your dependents that you become one yourself. So be careful about, being too brave. I'm not a big fan of parental bravery. So that's essentially the message I have for you. You want to go to the next slide? But for those of you who haven't had a kid in college, this is the kind of thing you can expect to receive from your student. This is an email. You can look at it yourself. And it's not very subtle, but parents aren't really stupid, so here's the response. Next slide. So you can get a message from that too. As a general rule of thumb, I think students ought to earn money over the summer and on vacations to provide themselves with spending money. It's a good object lesson in how to live. As a general rule of thumb, it takes about $2,500 to $3,000 per academic year to keep the kid in pizza. And anything above that probably is just only work a little harder. Some parents ask me about, should they have a credit card? I would suggest yes, but I would say don't use it. Just have a credit card with a very limited credit line on it in case the student needs to, gets in a jam, he misses a plane flight, or he's got to rent a car, or he gets in some kind of trouble in Mexico. At least he's got the means to get out of that trouble using a credit card. It's just a safety mechanism. For those, these are my contact numbers. I'm happy to speak to any of you who would like to speak to me. My emails, I'm very good about answering emails, and my website is www.paulrubles.com. I write blogs. It's not always about education. I write about anything I like to write about. I'm not always correct in my opinions, but I found out it's cheaper than therapy, so I just write. And in that same website, if you're interested, I have my client services and costs. You can look at it if you want. And so, Rita, I am officially done, and I've enjoyed this, and I'll be happy to, if you want to email me any questions, I'd be happy to see if I can answer them.
Thanks.
Okay? So,
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been fun.
Paul, that was such wonderful and important and valuable information. We are all really, really thankful and appreciative that you would take the time to share that with us.
My pleasure.
So I've left Paul's information up here for a little bit so that hopefully you all had time to copy it. And I am just going to put up the financial social work slides for one more slide there, and tell anyone that was new with us for this webinar about financial social work certification. It incorporates 5 workbooks that are self-paced and self-study, and our students spend 6 months or have up to 6 months to complete it, and then it's all downloadable and all online, and then there's an exam that our students have 2 weeks to complete, and the certification does include 20 CEs, and it's only $495. So at this point, I would just like to share with everyone this student loan calculator from the New York Times, which is another way that I think you can input the information and figure out the student debt or loans that you would be taking for your student. And I would like to share that on Thursday, September 18th, we will have a very special event when we launch Financial Social Work Certification 3.0, and we hope that everyone will join us then. So I'd like to thank Paul one more time, and to invite everyone back in the future to one of our free monthly financial social work webinars. Thanks again, Paul, and thanks everyone for taking advantage of all of this wonderful information. Bye now.
Bye.